Hey, so people have been playing this Black Myth Wukong game, which is a good game, and I think the players also like the animations at the end of each of the chapters. But I think most players would find the animations beautiful, the art style is fascinating, but at the same time, they would find the stories quite confusing. And I think most non-Chinese player would just assume it's a language barrier thing and think that's the problem. But as a Chinese speaker, when I first watched those animations, I found it confusing also. So it's not just a translation problem. And after some digging, I found that I think the developers have this assumption that the players playing this game, like they would not only read the original novel, which we know this whole game is based on the classical Chinese novel Journey to the West. They assume that all the players not only read that story, they also are very familiar with all the characters and all the stories inside that novel, which I think is a unrealistic assumption. So, simply put, most of these animations, like they are based somewhat loosely based on the original novel, and the developer has add their own content and make some twists and come out with this animations. So in this video, I'll try to give some facts and tell some of the stories from the original novel, which I think would help a lot for people to understand what the whole story is in this beautiful animations are really about. So let's start with the first one. So the first chapter's ending animation is actually most accurately adapted from the original story. So it tells how Elder Jinchi and Black Wing King met and became friends and all the stories that happened afterward, which you can find in chapter 16 and 17 in the original novel Journey to the West. So let's watch and talk about this part together. So this little monk is the Elder Jinshi in chapter 1's game. In the original novel, didn't state that how the Black Wing King, which is the black bear, and Elder Jinshi met, but well, this story kind of gave their own versions of the story. So in the original story, like Elder Jinshi lived a very long life. Like when the story happened, he was 270 years. And maybe due to his friendship with the black bear, because the bear have some magic to keep him living long. And this part tells that how like he's being living long and being steady, stepping up to the high ranking of monks. And I'll stop over here. So you see there's all this jasa flying around, and I think it's quite confusing if you don't know the stories. So in the original stories, because he lived a very long life and he has this hobby of collecting jasas. So like I think he has hundreds of jasa. And when so this part is what the actual story begins. So this this monk is the Tang Sanzang in the original story. Like he went to a temple of this Jin Shi Zhanglao, and like they met and they talk, and Jin Shi Zhanglao would show off his collection of jasa, and Tang Sanzang would say he has a one that the emperor gave him to take to the west to exchange for the Buddha's literatures. So Jin Shi Zhanglao became jealous of the jasa, and he wanted to make it his own. So in the original story, he would like borrow the jasa for a night, and then he had some bad thought that he asked his pupils to burn Tang Sanzang and Sun Wukong alive, so like he can keep this jasa for himself. And so this is the part that in the night he's keeping his jasa. And I think in the original story, like he hide the jasa his friends, which is the Black Wing King's mountain. So he hid it there, and then he asked his pupil to burn down Tang Sanzang and Sun Wukong, which is why you see there are fires here. So I think the animation is too artistic, so you don't if you don't know the story, you kind of wondering why there are fire everywhere. Right? So in the story, Sun Wukong has protected Tang Sanzang from being burnt, and after the night, they confronted Elder Jingchi, and Elder Jingchi was so ashamed that he bumped his head into a wall and committed suicide. So that's what happened in the original story. And then Sun Wukong would go to a Black Wing King's mountain and to try to take back the jasa. And so there's some stories developed there. So I'll just go to the end. So in the end, like Guan Yin would come to help Sun Wukong, and the Guan Yin would like take the Black Wing King, the Black Bear, as an apprentice. So which would connect it to these parts of the story.
Master, it still puzzles me. A monk's lust for gold should be quelled. Why does Elder Jinche still cling to that one Kasaya?
Bereft of that Kasaya, how shall they show the world their ties are cut and their lust is quelled?
So I found this last part of the narrative are quite interesting. So the black bear is like asking why does his friend the 金翅长老 who was and so old, like he had learned all the Buddhism, and why does he still cling to the jasa? So that the master Guan Yin tell him that if he doesn't have that jasa, how would he show like other people his like soul knowledge for to Buddhism? Like how would he show his high ranking as a monk? So it's kind of sarcastic in the Guan Yin say. It's like telling that Elder Jinchi, he doesn't really get the concept of Buddhism, which we know, like you're supposed to let go of all the stuffs that you have and just focus on practicing Buddhism. So in this story, actually, there are not really some really good guys or bad guys. Like the black bear, he's not like some bad Yao Guai. He's like his friendship with Jinchi in the original story was like they both practice Buddhism, so they become friends and they have discussion about Buddhism. So like even Elder Jinchi was original not a bad guy. He's just become too greedy when he saw the jasa of Tongsanzang. So this is this animation kind of tells the whole stories of this part, and if you don't have the understanding of the original novel, I think it's really hard to understand what the animation is about, which has lots of elements in it, but also it's too short to show clearly like all the details of the story. And then we go to the second chapter's ending. So the second chapter is actually not from the original novel. It's made up by the developers themselves. And this story, I think, is just a connection to the third chapter. And I think it's an interesting story, but won't put too much of personal interpretation into it. I'll just translate the parts of the narrator's word in the end.
Beasts, Buddhas, Yaoguais. Each of them bears a distinct root from birth, superior and inferior. None should disturb what's decided. Am I right, Sun Wukong?
So this part of wording shows that in the Buddhism belief that there are classes and rankings in this world. Like if you're in heaven, you are like the toppest ranking, and then there's humans, and then there's beasts, and there's Yaoguai. So what it's saying is like all these classes, like they are different. So you are what you are in the ranking, and so he's like asking Sun Wukong, do you agree with it? And it's kind of just a way that they try to bring out the rest of the story, I think. And then there's the third chapter. The third chapter is also very interesting. It's also a story that made up by the developers. But to understand the story, you need some background knowledge. So let's watch and I'll explain. So this sea monster is actually the main boss in chapter 3, which is Yellow Bra. And Yellow Bra in the original story, he was like the apprentice of the second ranking Buddha, and like Tang Sanzang was the pupil of the Li Buddha, the Buddha. So we know that in Buddhism there are reincarnation. So like you reincarnate into this sea monster, and like he gave people treasure and gave them medicine, gave them food. In exchange that people beat him, but again there are people who are so greedy, like they want more of the treasure, so they just cut him up and took all the treasures they can get from his body. So
tarried in
this
the
monk
mortal
here,
world for a good while, didn't you?
see the monster call him 金蝉子.
Speak clearly.
Once again, I proved it to you, Jinshanzi.
So who is 金蝉子? Well, in the original story, 金蝉子 is the original form of Tang Sanzang. So he was the apprentice of the Buddha, and so that's why they know each other, because they are both apprentice of like the first and the second Buddha. So apparently this story is like
You chose a means to an
saying
end,
that they
not
have
to approve.
made a bet. So
You sow chaos in hearts just for the sake
even
of
though it
living.
didn't tell what the
How
bet is
absurd
really
and
about,
pathetic.
but you can somewhat tell from their conversation that the bet is mostly about that can people be taught, or like can people learn from Buddhism to like improve and transcend themselves. And the monster, which is Yellow Bra, would bet that people would like just not learn Buddhism and just like being the greedy beings, and he's like trying to use himself to prove it.
If not for winning, why debate over means?
And Jin Chanzi would argue that it's like he's confusing of the causation, because it's him, the monster, that use those treasury and those stuff to lure people by their greed. So it's not that people wouldn't practice Buddhism or wouldn't want to be good. It's because the monster have made them like they only see the treasure, see the money, see the profits. So it's like saying you're like, he's kind of saying that the Yellow Bra is cheating, and like laughing at him to like care so much about winning or losing. And in the end, Yellow Bra said, if you can't win, how can you prove like all your arguments? That's what the Yellow Bra was like saying. So I think this is a fun adaptation of the original story. So like you have to at least have some background about like who Jin Chanzi and who the sea monster is, to like to get your own understanding of the story. And the fourth chapter is actually it's not hard to understand, and because we all know. So then let's talk about the fourth chapter. Actually, I think it's easy to understand because we all know it's talking about the background of Zhu Bajie, but it's made some twists and some added content. So I think I'll try to explain as the video is playing. So we know Zhuba Jie is original like a god in heaven, and in the original story, that he was drunk, so he went to harass some maid in heaven, and that maid is actually a famous character, which is Chang'e. Like we know, Chinese people have this moon festival, and which is based like the Chinese belief that Chang'e has ate some special some heaven medicine and like it's floated to the moon and have been living on the moon ever since. So that's the maid he had raised. So this girl he's chasing is supposed to be Chang'e. And you can see that he used the moon as the background. And then this girl I think is the spider guai, which is in the fourth chapter. And this part is like made up by the developers themselves. Like in the original story, there's no romance between Zhuba Jie and Spider Guai, and so they try to squeeze these characters into the original story, and somewhat make it a little confusing. So this is the confusing part, because in the original story, like he was harassing this Chang'e, this maid, and then it's the Jade Emperor. Like he was angry, so he tried to punish him and like make him reincarnate into human. But in the animations, like we don't know why it's about. He fell down, right? So it's kind of funny that in the original story, that Zhuba Jie is supposed to like reincarnate into human, but somehow things went wrong and he turned into a pig. And I think the animation tried to show it, but it's also not really clear for the audience. Like you don't know how he turned into pig. So I think he's just reincarnate into a wrong body. He just like went into a pig body. Not like he. So it seems like he's changed because he's chasing this girl, but well, it should be just a mistake that he went into the body. And this part is actually very accurate because we all know that Zhuba Jie is like very into women. So like when the spider wise chapter, like the story happened, like he really turned into a fish so that he can swim around those beautiful spider wise. This part of the animation. somehow make that this girl was in heaven. She was like somehow also going down and became a Yaoguai, which is the developer's version that they try to make this romance between them. So apart from the edit romance parts, most of these stories like taken right from the original story. So this is the fourth chapter, and then the next chapter it's also based on mostly on the original story of the Ox King, but it has some like edit content and make it hard to understand too. So we'll skip to the next chapter. So the next part is chapter 5, and the chapter 5's animation can be very confusing because it combines two stories into one, and it's used montage and like they are cut together. So the first story is the original story from the novel, and the second story is what we see in the game, that how Sun Wukong was like fighting the heaven and then died at the end. So I will watch this animation and I will tell you like which part is the game story and which part is the original story.
You've served the righteous cause.
So this part is the game story. Like they are
Your power has gathered
dividing the dead monkey's parts.
You've endured hardships, and I go with the town. And the bull, it is the hardest to turn against a sworn brother. You can have his body.
So this part shows like in the game how Sun Wukong died fighting the Heaven's Guard.
Wretched boy, your luck plagues your every step.
And Sun Wukong and the Oxing are actually like band of brothers in the original story. So like they are both very strong Yaoguai.
Save your strength, brother. We yet to slay our way to the court and seize that senile emperor. This one must be the chief of their troop. my back while I go play with him.
So until now, it's all the game's own story.
Your reluctance is plain.
And from here, it's
Like
the
my
original
own.
story.
They forced me to drink from the river of childbearing, to bear that boy in my womb. If not for that monkey, we could have lived our separate lives in peace. As if none of this had happened.
You're cute. You knew who I was from the start. Why'd you choose to be their lapdog? I never wanted to sever our ties. If kinship means anything to you, give me that relic and let me avenge my people.
My king! Let the monkey have my fan! And there will be no trouble!
So this is the part from the original story. Like in the original story, the Sun Wukong and Tang Sanzang, like they first met the Red Boy, which is a son of the king, and after the fight, they asked help from Guan Yin, and Guan Yin Buddha would then take the Red Boy as his pupil, and then they would go to his wife, which is the Iron Fan Princess, and they would try to borrow the fan, and since her son was taken away because of the monkey, so she was like angry with them. So there's another fight, and then at the end they would go to the Ox King, and then because there were all those conflicts from his son and his wife, the Ox King would be very mad, and then he would fight fiercely with Sun Wukong, and that because he is so strong, Sun Wukong would have to go to heaven and ask for all the help he can, and which will be shown right here.
Your brother, I've disciplined. Your boy, I've given away. Your wife's fan. Today, I'll take it with me too.
So the timeline of this is actually
Right.
like
It's the
before
only path left
the
for the likes of us.
prior parts.
Don't you understand, brother?
This is like a fight in the original
I
story.
took out the bull's concubine with a whack
And
of my rake too.
in the original story, like Zhu Bajie would have wrecked the Ox King's mistress son, which is a fox wife. So he was furious. So you see, all the gods came to help, and with all the gods' help, like they can finally do this thing. So you can tell like how strong like the Ox King was. And like even his head was chopped down, he wouldn't die. He just grow back another head. That's what's in the original novel. And the animation used this as a like scene cutting, like the stories back to the new story. So this part is back to what the developers' new stories like. Like he closes his eye, opens it, and it's like maybe 100 years later or something. So back to the parts which the monkey is dying. So like how do you can think of it as an ABA type of storytelling. So the first part is like the new story, and then it's cut to the B parts, which is the original story which happened like prior to the new story, and then it's cut back to the new story again. So if you don't know like the original story, you will be very confused of what this story is really about, because it's like two stories combined together.
The way I saw it, with enough merit and a position before the Buddha,
Back to the
they
game
would
story
leave me
that
be, and all of you as well.
Wukong fighting
Now
fight
I
for the
see, for someone like me,
guarding
staying
got
alive
killed
is
in the
enough
end.
to be a transgression. Brother, take care of your wife and children, and remember, steer clear of my remains.
The ending animation of the chapter 6 is actually quite straightforward. If you only know that it's telling the story backward. So this is the part that the monkey
那
died.
道锅一直都在你头上。
张开你的口眼，把遮住摘下来。
And then the timeline is back to when they finished their journey to the
因
west.
大闹
And
天
the
宫，
Buddha was like
无以
saying
甚深
stuff
法
to them.
力，压在五行山下，幸天灾满族归于释教，且习儒隐恶扬善，在途中练魔降怪有功，全中全始。
And then it tells the story that during the journey to the west, they're fighting all the 妖怪.
那厮触犯了上天，玉帝立此三世，只等积咸了米劲，高舔的面筋，登了段锁艇，那方才该下雨嘞。
There's a quick recall of the was like he was in heaven, like shaking a tree. And this part was like he was found under the mountain by the Buddha before man's consent. The timeline is like just keep going backward. And it's like he was still the monkey king. He's still in his cave with her. Oh, so this is the fun part that he has a bet with the Buddha and he can fly out of the Buddha's hand. He loses. He's making a chaos in the heaven. This is when he's still in his monkey's cave. Sharing with all the other monkeys before he went to fight in the heaven. Yeah, so this part is like the original Sun Wukong story. Yeah, so this is the translation of the original story, which is connected to all the animations in the game. And I hope this explanation will help you understand more about what's happening in all those animations. And like if you really want to know the whole story or you want to read by yourself, I'll put like all the chapters of the original story which is related to the chapters of the game, like so you can read it yourself. And I think the English version is like all the chapters are like totally same with the original Chinese one. So like here is like what the chapters are happening in the game. So for the first chapter, it's in the game. It was like related to the chapter 16 and 17 in the book, and the second chapter it was related to 20 and 21 chapter in the book. For the third one, it's like 65 and 66, and for the fourth chapter, it's like 72 and 73, and for the fifth chapter, it's 60 and 61 in the book. And for the last chapter, of course, we know it's the whole story of Sun Wukong, so it's about the whole book. So yeah, if you really want to dig deep into a story, into the original novel, here's my notes for you to look up. Because I think the way the developers like they make those animations, it's too artistic, so it's hard for people who have no knowledge of the original story or the original concept to gets what the stories are really about, because those animations are too short, and what they want to tell you is like some very big story. Like you can see in this chart, like there are like 2 chapters for each of the 2 chapters of books writing for each of the games chapter. So that's a lot of stuff. So I hope this video's explanation will help you understand more of those fascinating animations in the game, and I hope you too, and maybe like you can enjoy more of the game when you understand all this concept and stories. Yeah, let's thank you for watching the video.